Hey, what's up? It's me again. Some people recently suggested that we do some Warhammer 40k stuff. And after seeing those two images, I grabbed one of my favorite books for ref, started flipping through, and found some interesting proportions that we could use for the design. I'll link this book in the description. But it has some amazing refs for shapes. So I grabbed a couple of photos and I started sculpting. In this video, we're mainly gonna talk about concept design and how you take an old design and modernize it. In our case, the Tau from Warhammer 40k, and overlaying on top some shapes from Armored Core, which are very modern and sophisticated. This is going to be very close to how I would approach a task in a professional environment as a concept artist. You often get asked to take a character that looks very cheesy or old and make it look cool and have a fresh new take on it. And personally, some of the mechs that I find the coolest come from Japan with the Armored Core series. So we're going to try our best to absorb the shapes, integrate them into our personal visual library, and then apply those shapes onto an actual project. And then maybe with some chance we'll be able to digest that sick mecha Japanese aesthetic and at the end of the day just become a better artist. I start by sketching a bunch of different proportions, trying to really nail down the stance and the shape of the legs that we like so much about the Armored Core stuff. It takes me a bit of time, but after doing a couple of them, I finally end up with something I like. I'm not just making shapes randomly, I'm looking carefully at my ref and trying to mimic the shapes that I see as best as I can. I'm basically doing a study, but in a very applied way. I'm still gonna modify the design so that it's not just straight up Armored Core, and that we integrate some of those important design features that makes it look also like a 40k character. But I'm gonna exaggerate certain aspect of the design and stuff that in my opinion makes the design look cooler, like the missiles and the guns and the over the top feeling that we have with the Armored Core stuff. At this stage, I'm very loose and I block out the shapes and I don't focus too much about detail, just so I'm able to get an overall sense of proportions for the whole design. What shapes are bigger than the others, what features I want to accent, and once I'm happy with that, I can commit to a piece and start figuring out how it looks exactly. I wouldn't say it's detailing quite yet, but it's really figuring out the design of each part separately. Since I blocked out the leg piece as best as I could with the ref, now I'm trying to improve on it and change the shape so that it looks closer to our 40k. For example, I noticed that there's always this kind of stepping armor on the top of the leg, so I try to work that in, but I'm still changing the shape so that it doesn't look as cheesy as the one on the Tau. I'm trying to make Armored Core looking shapes on top of it. I'm cleaning up the more sketchy parts as I go. Sometimes I remake some parts from scratch, just so I have less stuff to clean up. My sketch is not a strict guideline, it's just a approximation of what should be there. And I'm also starting to work out functionality and how joints are attached to each other, how the different parts are connected. I'm also thinking about how parts are separated, meaning how can I split up something so I can make it look more interesting? Where do I add detail so I can make it a point of focus? And in our case here, it's the legs. I'm gonna spend more time and more energy to make them look really cool. And when I'm not sure what to do, I just look back at my ref and use it as a guide for what shape to add and where to detail. And once you've done that enough, you're able to just freeball it and make kind of whatever you want. The more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you imitate great shapes, the more vocabulary you build to create your own. So I'm also trying to make this design my own. Yes, I'm copying shapes from Armored Core, but I'm also modifying them so that it fits my own personal aesthetic. Because as great as the Armored Core designs are, I don't want to be a copy of it. I want to be my own voice. Especially in a project like this where I don't have an art director and I can truly make what I want to make. Maybe for some people they'll think this design is too far from Warhammer and it doesn't actually look like a Tau, that this thing or this thing doesn't work and it would be better if it looked like that. But I couldn't care less. This is my project and I'm gonna make whatever I think looks best. You should be confident in what you're creating. It's built on everything you've learned and everything you are. So the more you learn, the more confident you can be. And that shows up in your sketching or even in the lines you're able to make. Confidence isn't necessarily loud. It's that feeling you get when you see somebody make something look effortless. And after enough practice, you start to get a bit of that yourself. It's what I enjoy the most about VR sculpting. It's where I feel the most confident about my work. And if you're trying to design something, I'm not saying you should do VR too. I'm just saying you should work with the tools that you're the most confident with. For some people it's drawing, for others it's Blender or ZBrush. This exercise of taking Armored Core shapes and putting them on top of a Warhammer design is not something that's exclusive to VR. You could do it with any other tool. It's the way you think about things. Getting better with a tool doesn't mean you'll be able to design better. You still need to understand what you're trying to make, either by studying it or applying it to something. I think a lot about why certain designs feel powerful. In Armored Core, the shapes are dense and layered, very angular, like armored plates built out of necessity. It's made for war and it's tough. The world is grimy and rugged. It's what's missing for me in the Tau design. They look too happy, I guess. It feels a bit goofy, like it's made for children. They're supposed to fight space marines and crazy Necrons and Tyranids and shit. They can't be looking like this, or they stand no chance. I know in the lore they're supposed to be the good guys, but they deserve a better, more aggressive design. They're supposed to be the pinnacle of technology, not some 80s retro arcade mascot. I know this is some very harsh words, and Game Workshop is in shambles right now. And maybe Japan in the year 2012 isn't better either, but at least it's more functional and it looks way more badass. Another part I really want to accent in this design is the huge missile launchers on the shoulders. It's another thing that feels very clunky in the original design, and that Armored Core does much better. Armored Core designs always start from a believable military kind of logic. Every hinge, every latch, every panel, it feels like it does something. The missiles bay have realistic vents and seams and clear mechanical logic. They look like they open, they fire, they reload. The Tau launchers, on the other hand, they often look like a toy because they're smoother and chunkier, more iconic than functional. They're meant to read clearly on a tabletop scale, not be giant machines of war. For me, to make a good mech design, you kind of have to understand how it works just by looking at it. It has a foundation of engineering and science behind it. There's still some elements of bullshit or fiction, but it still has that scientific kind of backbone. A sense that somebody somewhere actually had to build this thing and make it function. Without that, the design kind of loses weight and becomes plastic. The Tau missile launchers, they look futuristic, but they don't work futuristic. It's all rounded shapes and molded parts. It's like someone imagined technology without understanding the physics behind it. I'm not trying to make it perfectly functional either. It's not supposed to be a real machine, but I still want it to feel like something that could exist. There has to be some logic behind it, some hint of engineering that makes the fiction believable. It's always a push and pull between function and quote-unquote art, between what could exist and what just looks good. You need enough logic to create that suspension of disbelief, but not so much that it kills the imagination. It's that balance that makes good sci-fi design believable, where the fiction still feels grounded but still leaves enough room for space magic. A good way to do that is to use shapes that are easily recognizable. For example, a screw head or a bolt instantly makes something look mechanical, or in our case, this anti-missile countermeasure chaff launcher shape I'm making. It makes it look like it's made for combat and kind of futuristic or advanced, at least, technology. Maybe you don't exactly know what it is, but you've seen it on a very advanced looking chopper or military vehicle in real life. I never really worried about style. It just kind of happens when you make enough stuff. You pick up little habits from everything you study. You learn the shape of panels or the arrangement of bolts, and over time it'll start mixing together. When I look at something like Armor Core or a Tau design, I'm not necessarily just trying to copy it. I'm curious about what makes it work. Once you get that, you can twist it or exaggerate it or completely break it. That's the fun part for me, when all the influences you have stop feeling like reference and just start feeling like muscle memory. You're not thinking about what to do anymore, you're just doing it. That's when your design voice starts to show up. The more you do these kinds of exercise, the more you build your own visual language, and you can do it with any other subject that you want. For example, I did the same idea but with Necrons. I just took the shapes that were there from the original design and then put my visual language on top of it. You could go even more grounded and ditch the Armor Core stuff and pull straight from real military vehicles. And that's the fun part. Every time you try a new mix, you train your eye a little bit more. And honestly, that's also what's usually asked of a concept artist, just mashing two ideas together and making it look believable. It's not always about inventing something completely new. It's about knowing how to blend stuff together in a way that feels natural. Every time you do it, you're working that design muscle, or stretching it, or whatever you want to call it. The more you practice, the easier it gets. You can pull shape from anywhere and just make them feel like they belong together. These kinds of mashup, they're how you train your brain to think like a problem solver. In production, you're constantly asked to mix worlds that shouldn't fit together. Like it should be alien but grounded, or advanced but believable. You should be able to change your style to work on whatever project you're on. To understand what types of shape make Warhammer look like Warhammer and Armor Core look like Armor Core. You need to start recognizing how far you can push stuff before it breaks. That's where the real learning is, not necessarily in the repetition or the perfect render, but it's in the moment you realize why something is not working and how to fix it. In this project, I think the part where I pushed it a little too far was when I did the head. It started drifting away from what makes a Tau feel like a Tau, and it got a bit weird and chickeny, and that's where it started to lose that recognizability. I actually redid the exercise with a smaller Tau unit the same general shapes and ideas, but on a slightly lighter frame. And that time I kept the head more in line with the 40k universe. Still stylized, but closer to the original design. I still refuse to put the big antenna fins because I just think it looks silly. It's a very conscious design decision. I also wanted to make a smaller version of this guy so they could work as a unit on the tabletop if I ever print them. It's cool seeing how shape translate also when you scale things down, like what still reads and what feels too small. Maybe that's why the design from 40k are so bold and exaggerated. Also, when you got two characters standing side by side, you start noticing what actually defines the design language. Like what makes it look like a Tau versus just a generic sci-fi design. And in the end, I still prefer making a mecha chicken head, even if it doesn't look like a Tau. You can call it a tall goose with the fin. I'm wrapping up some last little details on the drone launcher on the shoulders and some bits and bolts on the guns. Pretty happy with how the design came out. Keep an eye out for when the 3D printing files are going to be on Patreon. Thanks a lot for sticking around and supporting what I do. It really means a lot. Seems like you guys enjoyed the last real life painting video that we did. So maybe we do a mini painting video for these guys. Who knows? Anyways, I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.